Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Ronish of Statewide News Service, jbiztechvalley.com. And as you can see here, columnist for the Jewish press.
Right, I have a column called the Albany Beat, and I talk about how government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be. Now, talk about government. We have two powerhouse assemblymen with us. Steve Cymbrowitz from Brooklyn, welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you.
And we have Kevin Cahill, who's a longtime member of the Assembly from Kingston and Ulster County, and some parts of Dutchess, but welcome to the Jewish View. It's so good to see you here.
Good to see you too, Mark and Rabbi. Thank you for having us.
So, you guys have been on a tour almost of Europe. You were in Turkey and parts of Eastern Europe, Germany and Poland, and tell us about Steve. Tell us about
That's why you even went over here.
Well, it goes back to the fact that I'm a second-generation Holocaust survivor. My parents were born in Poland and were taken by the Nazis in 1939 at the age of 14 and 16, put in the ghetto, and then taken in cattle cars to slave labor camp in Częstochow. And it's something that has become part of me, of being part of a very small now group of people who, and now that we're losing so many of our, of people who are in this, who are survivors, it was something I grew up with, which is never forget. It's always something that my parents taught me to tell their story, so that people know that the Holocaust existed.
And your parents, did they record on video their story?
Well, not my father. My father didn't talk about it. But my mother told different stories, did record, and told me a different story every single night. And she just passed away 2 weeks ago on July 27th.
My condolences to you. I'm so
Thank you.
sorry. May you be comforted by all the mourners of Zion in Jerusalem, as we say, a time-honored tradition. And Kevin, what about you? You're an Irish guy, so any Jewish roots there that you?
Token. Well, of course there are. Everybody has Jewish roots.
That's right.
That's what I say. Steve gave you a very quick thumbnail version of how we started these trips, but basically we were selected to participate in these trips because of our efforts in our communities for Holocaust remembrance. And Steve continues to this day to do a Holocaust education project with school children. I presented an exhibit in 2000, which then First Lady Hillary Clinton came to visit and inaugurate, called Hidden Children, Righteous People.
Oh, I remember
we
that.
put the exhibit on in Kingston, and we had a record number of visitors to the visitor center. The exhibit went on to semi-permanent installation at the Ulster County Community College, where literally thousands of people got to hear a different dimension, a different story about the Holocaust. And it is something that because of my upbringing in a very diverse community, has always been important to me. And I wanted to make sure that my children and their children had a fuller, richer version of the story, particularly as the first eyewitnesses are leading us one by one.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very small number of survivors of a first
Kevin
generation.
mentioned the program that I do yesterday, which was the 16th year that I did my program, and we had over 500.
What's the name of your program?
Well, it's a Holocaust remembrance program where we have a contest for public schools, yeshivas, parochial schools, and they learn about the Holocaust and then participate in a program.
Wow. So how has that attendance been growing over the years? Or?
It's been between, usually we get 500, that's all the hall can hold. So it's parents and children, as well as their teachers. And
Where
it's
do you-
very successful. We do it at Kingsborough Community College.
Okay, yeah, I know, I grew up in Brooklyn and
Yes.
Mill Basin, so most of my friends from high school went to Kingsborough Community College.
One of the things that we did in one of our early trips was to go to Moscow and with an organization called World Without Nazism. And we participated over the course of 2 years in helping develop the pan-European Holocaust curriculum. As you might know, in some of the former Soviet Union countries, there's an attempt to erase the Holocaust and erase the misdeeds of Germany and their forces, and to replace that story with a different story altogether, including the removal of cemeteries and a refocusing on perhaps some folks that we wish they wouldn't focus on. So one of the things that this organization was seeking to do was to create a curriculum that could have the credibility of being multinational and would be approved by an external source that could become the base upon which children, particularly in Eastern and Central Europe, would learn about the Holocaust in the 21st century. Steve's community-based Holocaust Remembrance Program became a central part of that, as did a program that we put together in our community where we had survivors and their families bring in what are now would be perceived to be relics of their experience from and around the Holocaust.
One of the people I know in your Tibor Spitz.
Oh, Tibor is my hero.
Oh, he's
Tibor,
one of your
I
constituents.
will say more about him later, but let me just say there is no human being on this earth who gives a better hug than Tibor.
That's right. That's right. And you know what? It's genuine. It's something that, I find that from the Holocaust survivors that when they give you that hug, it is so
Life-affirming.
Life-affirming, exactly. It's something special, and it's yes, I've been party to some of his hugs also.
Well,
I want to have him on the show. so.
I wish you would.
Yeah.
I would make sure I got a copy of it or was able to tune in. I also speak in high school classes, and one time I was at Dalenville High School, and Tibor and I were in competing classrooms, so I canceled mine.
That's it. You want to see him, yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to, in your community, Kevin, you have a couple of Chabad. The Heks have a Chabad center in Kingston or at the Orthodox
The
Synagogue.
reason I'm the first one up to shovel my sidewalk in the morning on a Saturday is because of Rabbi Hecht, because his house is, my house is in between his house and his synagogue, so.
Oh, that's,
he has to walk
okay.
there, so we
So
see
that's
each
the
other.
house I threw eggs at. I'm sorry. So anyway, but, so you shovel the synagogue walk?
No, I shovel my walk because it's a very long walk, and he comes marching up with his little duckling children as they all go up
Right.
the street, and we oftentimes have great conversations. The kids think I live on the lawnmower and
Oh, I
the
see.
snow blower in the winter. But yeah, we have two synagogues that the Heck family's involved with.
Right, one in
Rhinebeck and one
Rhinebeck.
also in Kingston, and then we have several other synagogues in the community in New Paltz, Woodstock, and
Kerhonkson?
another. Well, yes, I don't have the Kerhonkson anymore. That's in Ellenville, but I still
Yeah.
stay close to that community. Well, we have the Rhinebeck, Kingston, several in Kingston, New Paltz, and Woodstock, and pretty solid Jewish population growing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That Woodstock congregation started out so small.
About a
and
couple hundred, it's over 2,500 people now.
And now, and they have to hold their High Holy Day services under a tent, I think. Well, they did at one
They did,
point,
they
yeah.
did.
Well, I mean, people from Albany go down there, and
One of the things that I wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that was made very important that
Yes.
people understand is our educational efforts are not limited to our communities. Steve is also somebody who makes sure that his story is told, his family's story is told amongst our colleagues in Albany. We make sure that we reach out cross-culturally to make sure that other cultures,
Mhm.
you know, among our group now is also a group of Muslims.
Mhm.
And we travel to Israel, we travel to Turkey, where we visit with Jewish families in Turkey.
Right.
And we bring a message of brotherhood and sisterhood, of fellowship, across political lines, across religious lines, across cultural and ethnic lines. And I have to tell you that I've known many people in my life who have been instrumental in conveying that message, but I don't know anyone who's been more effective than my friend Steve.
And in Albany, we have a gentleman, Dr. Lozman, Michael Lozman, who restores cemeteries in Eastern Europe.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
talking about how the Russians or some of the countries in Eastern Europe are trying to wipe out the Jewish cemeteries, and he's actually gone out and restored about 13, 14 cemeteries in
Very
Lithuania.
impressive that he gets the
Those.
volunteers to
Yeah.
do that. And you also have Rabbi Niederman from Brooklyn, who does the same thing in other countries. But it's really important to let people know that the Muslim community had, the Turkish community
Yeah.
that we work with had no idea that the Holocaust occurred. And now what we
Really?
do, the young people, we get people from the Kings Bay Y and from the Amity School together, and they learn about each other's culture. They go to Holocaust museums together and learn about each other's history.
And you know, in Albany, we have the Turkish Cultural Center here.
They've been critically important to our mission.
How so?
Baysal Yushan and the Turkish Cultural Center in Albany have been very important to giving us access. Among other things, Baysal introduced us to the city of Izmir, the 7 or 8, is it, synagogues in that city that he and others are involved in the restoration of. On the subject of cemeteries, there's a cemetery in Gallipoli, in Chanakli in Gallipoli, where the great battle was fought.
Yeah.
The National Army Cemetery, the military cemetery, has thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands of graves of people from every nation who fought there on every side, and it's considered now an international monument. But there's also a Jewish cemetery, and the Jewish cemetery is being desecrated.
And Rabbi Niederman
Yeah.
is the one who's working on that particular cemetery, of trying to save it.
How many graves in that cemetery?
It's unknown at this point.
Because many of them are gone.
Yeah.
Um,
That's what Dr. Lozman finds, is that a lot of the, it's interesting because he says a lot of the tombstones are fallen over, but the ones that have fallen over where the writing is faces the ground, has the writing is most clear because it's been preserved from the weathering, because it was protected by the soil.
But we found that as well when we went to Demblin, Poland,
Uh-huh.
where there was not one mention by the government. We met with the mayor and the town historian. There was not one mention of the Jewish community. But we did have somebody take us to a Jewish cemetery, and there's one monument there that was put up by a survivor who came back. He now lives in Germany. He came back and dedicated this monument to all the Jews who perished and survived from Demblin.
Mm-hmm.
And this was on a Jewish cemetery, and the only thing around the monument are broken tombstones.
Do you think that's deliberate? I mean, or it's just because it is over 70 years now since the Holocaust, occurred, so time withers, that, I mean, was it deliberate?
My opinion is that when it was destroyed, it was deliberate.
I think in
That's
the
interesting.
beginning, there was a maliciousness to it and a purposeful attempt, and this is part of what we're trying to do. We're trying to get this story told. We want to make sure that this is not a one-dimensional, mention the Holocaust, mention World War II, Nazis bad, Americans good. That's a nice, easy thing to think about, but it's far more dimensional than that. Stephen's family was erased from Demblin, and along with every other Jewish family. And I think in the beginning it was purposeful, but I do think that since that time, it's just a product of benign neglect. The cemetery has not been desecrated there, but it also has not been maintained. And we found it amongst the bramble. It was hidden behind the weeds on the edge of town. When you walk through town, this street, the main street in Demblin, that used to be populated mostly by Jewish merchants, there's no trace whatsoever. And this was on the heels of us just returning from Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen.
The work must be awesome, because I, of course, went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and they don't have the names there, but it's like even a wall of all the names of the communities, let alone obviously every community had, hundreds of thousands of people. And then I'm just trying to do the math that, every community, of course, had a cemetery, they had their own private cemetery. So you must be dealing theoretically with hundreds, if not thousands, of Jewish cemeteries throughout Eastern Europe and Russia.
And that's why,
have to be dealt with.
and that's why Dr. Lozman says putting up a fence around the cemetery is the most important thing.
You
because
said 13, 14, I mean, I'm talking
No,
about
but at least,
thousands.
no, I'm saying that, but at least the fence at least gives you the boundary of where those stones are.
Well, there was a
and
fence
people-
put up by the survivor in Demblin, that, with a Star of David,
Yeah.
and that was the only way of knowing
That's right.
that there was a cemetery there.
Before we could open the gate, we had to clear the brush that was knee-high. This was one of the many things that we do. We take this information, we come back to our communities with it, but the very fact that we're going to those communities is also significant.
Can there be any state funding to help with cleaning up these
Which
Jewish
state?
cemeteries?
Polish state?
No,
I mean,
New
which
York
state?
State.
No.
They can't be.
No, but we continue to urge contributions from benefactors and other people who have been willing to do that sort of thing. And we've tapped into, in some instances, and encouraged support for the stabilization and restoration of the 7 synagogues in Izmir.
Well, that's a good point. The synagogues in Izmir, there are several that are still very active. Some of them have daily minions, and some are only open for
Shabbos,
Shabbat.
yeah.
So, but it's interesting that trying to raise dollars to restore those synagogues.
And that's Izmir is in Turkey? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
But you know,
Izmir
I
is an
want to
interesting
say,
place in Turkey, too. It's a place that was a refuge before. It's a refuge again for Syrian refugees today.
Wow.
you know, I just, you know, there is restitution money. I don't know where that's going to. I mean, I think that's a very touchy subject, because they do get $1 billion from Germany, and if they can use some of this money.
That
I mean,
goes to survivors, and to the conference receives dollars to give to not-for-profit organizations in the country to deal, you know, to help and work with survivors.
So you also had this connection with the Syrian crisis. You mentioned Syria and
Yes.
Turkey, but also the economic stress in Greece and the impact on the Jewish community there. You want to?
We visited with people in Athens that were selected for us by local authorities and local people involved in the Jewish community.
Just to be clear, not Greene County. You're talking about Athens,
Yeah.
and Greece. Yeah. Okay.
The other Athens. And in the course of our conversation, one of the things that we hope we accomplished there was to enlighten that individual as to what exactly was taking place, because it appeared that she had become somewhat numb to the persecution all around her. We said, is there any problem? Have you seen anything since the economic crisis hit?
Right.
She said, no, not really. Well, there is that swastika on the Jewish cemetery that they painted last week. We said, well, that's something, not nothing. And then she mentioned 2 other incidents of anti-Semitism that have occurred all within the space of a month. And it is not uncommon. We heard the same thing in Istanbul the first time we went, that when an economy starts to crunch, when it starts to collapse, people look for scapegoats. And we know very well that over the course of the history of the Jewish people,
Yeah.
you've been scapegoated more than once, and this was the same circumstance here.
So that's the rise of it, you would say, because there is an issue of rise of anti-Semitism throughout Europe. And they always got that headline, but that's what you would say is
And
just the economy.
It's only a generation away from our country as well, unless we do something now to educate the public, and that's what we're trying to do. I want to also introduce another dimension of our trip, which I think is very important, and Steve touched on it. We have a group of people of Muslim faith who come with us, and I will just recount a very quick story about our return from the city of David, going back into our hotel, where I was walking back with an imam. And he said to me on that private walk, I came to this country very skeptical. I came to this country wondering why the people that occupied it thought they could get away with it. And he said, I can tell you right now, this is on day 2, he said, this is their country. They've built a beautiful and magnificent place here, and their investment should never be turned back. So we made a believer.
Yeah.
And that story can be replicated and is replicated many, many times. And Steve mentioned the lack of knowledge in some aspects of the Muslim world of what occurred in the Holocaust. It is deep-seated, that ignorance.
And you know what? Even in the United States, there's a deep-seated ignorance, because the Holocaust and World War II have been boiled down to a page and a half in a lot of history books. So, you know, I always tell people when I went to when I was in school, history was a lot easier because there was a lot less of it.
But it's really very important. This is why we do what we do, so that people don't forget. They understand that the Holocaust did occur, and we need to continue to talk about it.
Yep. No, it's absolutely. This is now. What was your when you went to Auschwitz and another concentration, Birkenau? Was this the first time you were there, and what was that like for you?
For me,
Yeah.
it just visualized what my parents went through, the bunk beds, the barracks, what my parents lived in. It was very, very emotional.
What about the stench or the smell? Is that gone?
Well, I didn't smell anything at the crematoriums, but Kevin had some interesting experiences there, where when we're in the rooms, he actually, well,
Tell me, Kevin.
Well, I will not go deeply into it because it wells up a great deal of emotion in me.
That's why I asked you.
I had spent, I've been to the American Holocaust Museum in Washington DC at least 20 times. And
Really?
I bring people there with regularity. I brought a Finnish girl there when she was my exchange student with my family, and Finland was on the side of Germany. And we went to find out what the role of Finland was in the Second World War. It turns out that they protected every single one of their Jews in their state. They fought on the side of the Germans, but they fought on the side of the Germans on the Russian border where they were facing an even greater threat. The visit to the American Holocaust Museum I've always found to be an inspiration and a tribute to survivorship. Yad Vashem is a very different experience, and I've been there several times as well. And going to Yad Vashem, it imbues you with that sense of doom, of that horror, of what the Holocaust really stood for. The building is designed to make that happen. As you travel through Yad Vashem, it gets darker and narrower and darker and narrower, and the only light at the end of the museum is the light shining through the window that overlooks the city of Jerusalem. In the American Holocaust Museum, it's exactly the opposite. At the end of the museum, there's a hall of remembrance that's bright and oftentimes filled with children that are making a cacophony that is probably maybe a little bit inappropriate, but it's children, and it's whenever you hear children, that's life. I always felt that I had the full experience of going to the death camps and the concentration camps, but having gone there, actually gone there, it evoked a very different emotion in me. It did not make me feel rewarded. It did not make me feel complete. It made me feel utterly angry.
To see on the walls nail marks, people actually...
Fingernail marks.
The fingernail marks, seeing the pain, could actually visualize the
The
pain.
crematorium?
Yes, the pain that was going on.
The crematoriums and also the work camps. The work camps were, I mean, it was a slow death in the work camps as opposed to a quick death where, you know, it also brought a new dimension to me. I didn't realize that people were literally taken off the train and put directly into the crematoriums, into the ovens. That was a phenomenal discovery for me. I mean, of course, everyone else knew who knew about the Holocaust. But the work camps too, to see the environment where people did live, people like Steve's parents, where they had to live and what they had to go through. Quite honestly, when we had a long, and we continue to have a debate about this, I walked out of there, we got back on our bus to go back to town, and I said, if they bulldoze this place tomorrow, I wouldn't lose a minute's sleep.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I think it should stay up.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the argument
the
that we
argument for
have.
Yeah.
That's you know...
So tell me, did you smell a stench or?
Well, I spent a great deal of time at the two crematoria that were left standing after they were bombed in their ruined state at Birkenau, and I didn't sense the smell per se, but certainly it was filled. If you've ever been to the shoe room in the American Holocaust Museum where they have the shoes piled high, you smell the leather. If you go to the luggage room at Auschwitz or I mean, I don't want to get too graphic here, but there are other rooms there where hair was saved and other piles and piles of people's personal possessions.
Mm-hmm.
I look at the suitcases that are marked with the names of people who thought they were going to refuge, only to find that they were going to their death. That was a harrowing experience for me. And what I'm saying about if they took it down tomorrow, I was a little offended by a gift shop on the premises. I was a little offended by a few other things.
At Birkenau or at?
No, not at Birkenau. There was a small gift shop at Birkenau.
At
There was a much
Auschwitz?
larger one at Auschwitz, yes.
Oh.
And I was offended by that. I also have a little bit of a problem, and it's only a little bit of a problem, and I'll overcome it because I think there's a greater good to come of it. In the reformation of the story of the people who were talking about their non-Jewish survivors of that period, it's become a little cottage industry, and that's a little disturbing. But to go from there to Demblin, to see the erasure of the Jewish culture in Demblin, including my colleague's own family, and to go from there to Athens, where there was an insensitivity a lack of awareness of persecution that was occurring to the individual we were speaking to going to Istanbul all on one trip, where there's an uprising on several different fronts, but where Jews are leaving. They're leaving once again. They're down to, when we first started going to Turkey, there were about 20,000. There's probably about 8,000 now. So to see this tells a story that needs to be heard. It needs to be heard by our colleagues. It needs to be heard by our constituencies. And Steve has the largest concentration of Turkish Americans in the state of New York, and one of the largest in the country. I have at the SUNY New Paltz College, the largest Turkish exchange program in the country, where these students come for just a period of years. And I go back there and I tell the story as Steve goes back to his.
You know, I think it's very profound. Of course, you're not Jewish, Cahill, but obviously you're an incredible friend to the Jewish people. But I think that's very, very important, because it was profound for me also when I went to the Holocaust Museum, American Holocaust Museum, Washington, D.C. I was just, most of the people are not Jewish. So I was in line with people, and I just was intrigued. You know, all right, for a Jewish person, you know, I'm a rabbi, but any Jewish person should care about the Holocaust. So these people from Oklahoma, and, you know, they obviously were not Jewish. So I turn around, you know, I just want to know, why did you came here? He says, well, this, you know, we heard about it, and we profound, and, you know, I wanted to, I didn't have the time, and I'm not a researcher, but, you know, what's your feelings coming out? You know, give me a little bit of a report or feedback. I'd like to, you know, would be intriguing. But, you know, the point is just, even though as Jewish people we feel more closely, obviously, because it was our people, but truth of the matter is that it's just like a step away from any culture. I mean, there are cultures in China, they kill, you know, these numbers, 20 million people, that they're not the same political, you know, sound as they are, and on, and there's just, and maybe the Holocaust is unique because let's kill the Jews, you know, no one says kill Chinese, you know, it's just maybe they don't like capitalists or whatever in Africa. But I think it's very, very important. You know, I just think for our viewers also, because a lot of people think, well, it's your Jewish thing. Of course it's Jewish, or people are forgetting about it. But it's a universal lesson, I think, that this is what, you know, people can do to each other, and it should be stopped no matter which kind of people they are.
You're right, and that's why many of the missions that we did were with Christians, Jews, and Muslims.
Right.
To get a different perspective. And the conversations that we had, not only during the trip, but have continued.
So let me ask you, we have Chuck, your colleague Chuck Levine heads up the Jewish Legislators Association as a shortened phrase for that. But, you know, why not have a Holocaust remembrance ceremony at the Capitol? Why not, and where you can, you know, where the Jewish Legislators Association could put this on, or have a, you know, Israel Celebration Day, Independence Day, you know. So why is, what, you know, you see, you know, we have Canada Day, we have the Turkish Day, we got all these other groups. Senator Diaz puts on a day that I can't even pronounce the.
Let me be clear that
So-
most of these organizations, most of these events are put on by outside organizations with the sponsorship of legislators, but they're not put on by the legislators themselves.
And what we do every year is we do a resolution in the Assembly commemorating Holocaust Remembrance Day. We do that about this time of year.
But I'm sure that you could get a group to sponsor it and have it, you know, brought to you by this Jewish Legislators Association. I mean, whether it's the Tisch family or whomever. I mean, there's so many people who would, you know, pony up what would to them would be small bucks to put something like this on. And I just don't see, I see Italian American, Irish Americans, you know, you have all these other groups, but we don't have that.
What we have done in the past is we've invited colleagues to join us on these missions.
But it's
And they
different
come
than
with-
having something at the well.
That's right.
And
The other thing, very, very important part of what we do is that the community become aware. Our colleagues, they're pretty much aware through the Holocaust Remembrance Memorial and so on, but to go back to our communities and do things is very important. And one thing I just want to make a point about is
Yeah.
Steve has been phenomenal in conveying the story
Yes,
of his parents.
absolutely, yeah.
But in addition to what happened after that oppression began. Steve has also viewed in me particularly the sense that what led up to it is important too.
Absolutely.
And this wasn't an event that happened the first time it showed up on the front page of the New York Times in 1943. In fact, it was a lot of the damage had already been done. By
10 years earlier or 15 years earlier.
15 years
Yeah,
earlier.
right.
And that's part of what we talk about. Making sure people know that the Cymbrowitz were an important part of the
And
Demblin
that's why having something at the Capitol when you have the interns
We'll look
there,
into it.
the legislative interns, and educating them and making it part of their coursework would be so beneficial and such an important part of their course curriculum, being at the legislature. I just think you're missing the boat, and I've told this to Chuck Levine, and I'm telling everyone I can. I mean, we have the fewest number of Jewish legislators now than we've had in probably a couple of decades, and we're losing a couple more next year. So, you know, we got to somehow inspire and keep alive this notion that, you know, in the Capitol, that, you know, we're not just this small group, you know, that we do have a wider voice and a wider message.
I think it's a good idea.
So I'll be the executive director of the group. How's
We'll
that?
talk to
Okay.
Chuck.
Thank you.
In any
Okay.
case, you know, thank you very much for being on the Jewish View. I mean, I think, like Mark was just saying, it's so important to get the message out, and of course, you know, here on the Jewish View, we're getting the message out also. So keep up the good work what you're doing, and especially for what you're doing for the Jewish community. And like I say, really an extension to the entire world to get that message out.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the
Thank you.
time. Appreciate it.